Okay. Hey, Sean. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great, Douglas. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming on this show. I appreciate it. So, according to your bio, you are the Tattooed Millionaire, yeah?
Yeah, that's the name of my first book that I put out, and I guess that's what some of the PR firms are referring me to as now.
Can I ask you something about the tattoo and piercing business, just generally, before we start?
Absolutely.
Because I know absolutely nothing about it, and I'm just curious. If somebody wants to start up a tattoo shop, is there a state certification that's required to get a license or something to do that?
Depends on the state and the county. So in Arizona, the answer is no, but in Nevada, the answer is yes. In New York, it's yes. In California, it's yes. So various counties and states have different measurements on the licensing requirements, and if you've been in the industry a long time, they're relatively easy to get. If you're a novice, then you have to do your homework and learn about the industry and the safety precautions before you do it. And quite honestly, that's exactly what makes sense.
How many businesses do you have operational at this point?
So currently, I have 15 companies. We have 6 brick and mortar retail stores for my primary company, which is Club Tattoo. We have 3 in Las Vegas on the strip inside the hotel casinos there, and then 3 in Arizona. They're all luxury tattoo and piercing studios.
How was your business affected with COVID?
Completely shut down, almost decimated us. We write about it in our new book, Brand Renegades. We decided not to lay anybody off. So my wife, partner, and I, Thora, we decided to fund our employees' payroll out of our own pockets. And what we thought was going to be a 2 or 3 week closure, turned out to be in some cases 4 and 5 months. And then we only officially reopened at 100% capacity in Las Vegas. So 3 stores there, literally about 6 weeks ago, June 10th. Was the reopening of Las Vegas 100%. So it had a tremendous negative effect on us, but we took it in stride and did the best we could to make sure we were able to keep our employees to be able to pay their rent and eat. That was our primary concern. And then making sure that our businesses were going to survive once COVID ended.
At what point did tattoos and piercings become sort of high fashion? Because I'm probably a bit older than you, and when I was growing up, it was not popular. It was not something that people did.
Yeah, I mean, it was relatively an underground, rebellious act to get tattooed or pierced.
Right.
Up until I would say about the mid 2000s, 2002 to 2005, you started to see a lot of professional sports figures and some TV shows that started coming out about tattoos and kind of endeared the general public to the lifestyle. And then once it was starting to be accepted from the professional sports players, actors, and television, what you saw was instead of a rebellious nature of getting a tattoo, it started to become a fashion forward statement. You started to feel that it was a fashion statement. So you started seeing a very generalized market really turn it up a few notches and become gold and diamonds, and you started seeing piercings and tattoos on the covers of Vogue and Cosmopolitan, and you started seeing them in TV commercials, which you never saw a tattoo in a TV commercial prior to 2003.
No, I don't think so. And now it's a multi-billion dollar industry.
I believe it's a $9 billion industry according to Google, but my gut tells me it's much larger than that. Our businesses do a little bit over $13 million a year annually. So I would imagine it's much larger than what Google's giving it credit for.
Okay. Can you give me just a quick idea? Let's say I came in and wanted just a very small little tattoo. What do you charge for something like that?
Well, each artist sets their own rates depending on their experience and skill level. So if you wanted something small, let's say you wanted your wife's name or something, you'd come in and we would walk you through the artist portfolio so that you could see the artwork of an artist that you would identify with and that you would resonate with. That would be first and foremost. Pick your artist that you want to do your tattoo. Secondly, we would go through, let's say, a bunch of fonts or something like that, just so you could see the styles of writing. Or we would have an artist literally just hand draw a script or a font up for you on the spot. Once you agree to the size and scope of what we are telling you, let's say we say it's going to take about an hour, It would cost anywhere from $150 to $250, somewhere in that range.
All right, well, that sounds pretty reasonable. Well, let's talk a little bit about you and your wife. How did you get started in this business?
In the 90s, I was in the music industry in a band called Grey Daze. I was the drummer. The band was having a pretty good amount of regional success, and we would start to go doing tours. We had a couple record deals. We started having songs on the radio. And as the band's trajectory was going up, we were playing out of town more and more. When we played out of town, we would make good money, but the money would go back into the band funnel and keep that business going. So the rest of us, we would show back up home and basically not really have money to pay our bills. So we came up with the idea of opening up a tattoo studio so that it could operate while we were out on the road. We would come back and still be able to pay our bills. That was as minimalist as we were thinking at the time. Then, of course, we leveraged the band fame into the tattoo and piercing studio, and it kind of took off like a rocket ship, became much more successful than we ever anticipated that it would.
Is the band still going?
That's a long story, but so in 2008, the band initially broke up. The lead singer was Chester Bennington. He went on to Linkin Park fame.
All right.
And was the lead singer and was basically the most successful rock band over the last 24 years, or last 22 years. They sold over 100 million records. In 2016, Chester and I decided to put the band back together, and we were working on a new album. But unfortunately, Chester passed away on July 20th, 2017. He took his own life. Yesterday was actually the anniversary of his passing, and we ended up putting out a record last year. We finished off the project that Chester and I started working on, and it did really well. We ended up with 3 Billboard hits, and one of the top albums of the year. And we're working on a second album right now. So yes, theoretically, the band is still together. However, Chester is no longer with us.
I do remember that, actually. I remember that news. I didn't know you were associated with that. Okay.
Yeah, he was one of my best friends in the world. He
Wow.
was also my business partner, and we miss him very much. He was an excellent, excellent human being.
Well, it's sad. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear it.
Well, thank you.
Okay, one of your questions, I want to hit one of your questions on your talking points. What makes you a brand?
So a brand, I think, is a term that's misused quite a bit. But a brand is basically anything that has a value associated with the identity without being present. So if you think of something, let's say Coca-Cola, you have an automatic identity and value you associate with that word, with that visual that is conjured in your mind, and that you can associate and identify with that term, with that company. So a brand is anything that has a value that can be identified, not being present.
Well, yeah, I think there is kind of a misuse of the word, because you said Coca-Cola, and McDonald's is a brand, Kraft Foods is a brand, GM is a brand. But there are a lot of people out there that are also considered brands, yeah?
Absolutely. Elon Musk is a brand.
Right.
Bill Gates is a brand. I am a brand. I'm a much smaller brand than those guys, but I'm a brand. And how you approach yourself, how you approach your perception in the world is going to come back and have a positive or negative effect on the value associated with that brand.
Well, that's a good segue right into your book. Your book's called Brand Renegade, Renegades with an S. Tell us a little bit about the book. What are you covering in the book?
So my wife and I decided to write a book together a couple of years ago. We had an interesting conversation with the people over at Entrepreneur Press, Entrepreneur Magazine, and they asked us to write a book. And so we sat down and we said, well, what is it we would want to convey together? And I think I do a lot of public speaking around the world, and one of the most common questions I get is people tend to think that because they're a small business that they can't identify with some of the business processes and attributes that come with the brands you just spoke of, Coke and McDonald's, and they tend to not be able to associate themselves with the same business practices that are used by the bigger ones. So my wife and I came up with the concept, well, how did we do it? So we went back and told the story of how we built our company, and then we identified key growing factors along that path from 1995 all the way till now. mostly talk about our failures. We identify what that failure was, how we dealt with that failure, and then how we moved on with that failure and ultimately became a success through those failures. And then we talk about different marketing strategies and how we took these larger business concepts and shrunk them down to fit our business model. And that's really what the book is about, is making your small business a brand so that your local communities and wherever community that you're in sees you that way. They don't just see you maybe as a mom and pop laundromat or restaurant, and different ways to use the community to make sure that you are I'm losing my words right here, but making sure that you're a standard in the community and that your brand can hold itself against some of these other companies that may not be thinking about your individual radius and how to operate within that radius.
You mentioned failure, and I know that people who are entrepreneurs and people who start up businesses, failure is at least 50%. Yeah?
At least, I mean, if not more.
If not more.
Learn so much from our failures more than I have our successes. It's easy to look at a success and guess why it was successful, but a failure will pretty much, if you're paying attention, a failure will point out exactly what needs to change pretty quickly. And it's easy to learn from your failures if you're paying attention, and you get your ego out of the way so that you can identify a failure for what it really is. As I said, I do a lot of public speaking around the world, and there's other speakers that get up and they say, "I've never failed in my life," and to me, they're just using semantics to get around reality. We all fail; it's part of life. Identify those failures so that you can learn from it and move forward and become a success in whatever area that you initially failed. And there's nothing wrong with calling a failure a failure.
Can you give us one example of something you guys failed at doing?
I'll give you a huge example. In 2012, we opened a store in San Francisco on beautiful Pier 39. We spent $2 million doing it. It was the most beautiful studio we had ever built. You were looking out our windows at the Golden Gate Bridge and the sea lions, and it was just amazing. And we ended up failing within 3 years. We had to close that store. And there's a multiple list of reasons of why we failed, and we identify them all in the book, as a matter of fact. But that was a failure, and it was a tough pill to swallow, to walk away and have to eat a $2 million punch to the face. It did not feel good. And thank God we were in a position that we set ourselves up for worst case scenario. If it did fail, that we would still survive, and we were able to survive through that.
So you lost your $2 million investment in that?
Gone. Lit on fire. Gone.
Can you give me one reason why it failed? I mean, I'm sure there were multiple reasons, but just give one.
One reason it failed was that we picked a location that was surrounded by businesses that didn't support our brand. It was surrounded by fudge stores and cotton candy and merry-go-rounds and things that just did not support the brand modeling. So the tenant mix was not a good fit for us. That's one reason. But like I said, there's 20 more.
Okay. Well, yeah, perhaps I'm just trying to think how important that might be. I mean, if somebody is starting up a small shop and they go into a shopping mall, initially when you look at the mall, you think, oh, well, there's all kinds of different shops in here. What difference does it make what I'm selling? But it actually does, yeah?
Absolutely. There's a reason you don't see Louis Vuitton in a low-end mall. There's a reason you don't see Tiffany in a low-end mall, but I guarantee you will see Tiffany near Louis Vuitton. They tend to pick like-minded brands so they can show their core audiences that these are the brands we associate ourselves with. Therefore, our brand has a higher value if you hold this other brand in a higher esteem. And that's really as simply as I can put it, is the tenant mix does make a difference.
We've got time for just one more. Let me hit one more of your talking points here. What it means to work on the business instead of in the business.
So there's several ways you can approach that. The way that we talk about in the book, the way that I speak specifically, and Thora gives a whole nother point, but I talk about diminishing returns. So you only have so much time in a day as a business owner where are you going to direct your efforts and what's the ROI? And I don't necessarily mean monetarily, but what is the effort, energy, and function coming back to the business worth of your time? So you have to figure out, how much is my time worth in this area or that area? And it took me several years because I wanted to be the guy that wasn't afraid to clean the counters, or wasn't afraid to clean the jewelry cases, or wasn't afraid to set up for certain sales or things like that. But at the end of the day, it had tremendous amount of diminishing returns. My energy, effort, and focus was far more needed and in other areas of my company, and therefore, by not doing this, the opportunity cost of that wasn't jeopardized. So I could focus in areas that had a much higher return, ROI, on whatever those efforts were for my company, not necessarily for myself, but for my company. And that's what we dig down on in that section of the book.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I just went through the same thing myself. I farmed out the editing of this show so I could concentrate on promotion and engaging with the fans and talking to people, where before I was doing the editing myself, and I was advised, farm that out because nobody's going to know the difference. But people will know the difference if I farm out the social media.
And has it had immediate impact on your company?
It's certainly improved the fan engagement. Yeah, because
there you go.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I thought, oh, let me just get rid of the social media, give somebody else. But people knew right away they weren't talking to me. They were talking to somebody else. Yeah.
And the authenticity was jeopardized, right? Because of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we quickly flipped that around.
Good for you.
Definitely good advice. Sean, we do have to wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out for your company,
Yes.
Personal website?
You can find our book, Brand Renegades, Our Fearless Path from Startup to Global Brand, at Barnes & Nobles. You can go to Amazon. You can find it anywhere online. BusinessGameChangers.com is our website, and ClubTattoo.com. You can find us on our social media accounts, Business Game Changers, Club Tattoo, Sean and Thora Dowdell both. And thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, thank you for coming